Okay, welcome back. Whether you're continuing on or it's been a few hours or days, we left off just talking in brief about agriculture and food, what we get from food, and we saw the difference in what we get from food just between two different continents, well, South America and North America, and that probably has a lot to do with what is available and what they're able to grow or afford to import in those areas. And we talked about the products and how that varies around the world, the necessity of agriculture as an art and a science, again, what we get out of that food. And now we're going to continue on with, again, this introduction of food and agriculture. All right, so world history, and we'll be talking from a historical context probably for the next 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, a little bit of humankind and a little bit of world in general, but mostly, of course, of the U.S. and the history of agriculture in the U.S. But it can be argued that crop domestication, given what we see, started about 8,000 years before Christ. About 7,000 years ago, animal domestication then, and that actually, just for those who care, I guess that would coincide with the date of Adam and Eve, or first man, or Australopithecus erectus, or actually, I'm sorry, Homo sapiens. Australopithecus would have been back here, so. And then the plow invented, so technology, it took about another 1,000 years. And you add 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. 8,000 years later, we have the late 1800s and early 1900s. The steel plow invented, and gasoline-powered tractors, so technology, and Mendel's theory of genetics. We have knowledge and science, science and technology informing the art of how we do agriculture. 1950s, as the world, particularly big famines and droughts of food in Mexico and India. These were two areas, not that they were the only areas, but these were two of the largest areas hit. And a gentleman by the name of Norman Borlaug, which you may have heard of, may not have, you will hear of him more, came in and he began sowing the seeds, if you would, of the Green Revolution a little before that, and really picked up. And this skyrocketed the U.S. Crop production, particularly in corn and wheat in Mexico, and then moving on to India. And so we really begin to try to conquer world hunger right in here. But as is often the case, there are laws of unintended consequence that occurred. And as of the 1990s, we were able to improve that green revolution by way of transgenic crops. And some of this was necessary because of the destruction of the environment we begin to see by the 1980s, in part due to the 1950s. So the solving of one problem, that is world hunger, actually began another problem, which was destruction of environment, until we get to today, and we have ag's grand challenge of feeding the world while conserving the natural resources it uses to do that very thing. But for now, we'll talk about that more later. Just want to continue on with this idea of different cultures and what's available to us. And we can see here in the modern era, it's no longer just local and what you can do for your family in hunting and gathering, but it is truly globalization. There's an interdependence. These are just a few newspaper clips here to show that. These come from the last, well, this one's from 2017, but modern era enough, eh? So ADM chief sees opportunity for U.S. ethanol in China. You know, out of 15 billion bushels of corn that the U.S. grows, 5 billion of that goes to animals. 5 billion of that goes to fuel. 4 billion of that goes to the rest of the world, and about 1 or 2 billion is left here, maybe for cereals and other things. Pretty crazy. Also in part success due to transgenics and to the Green Revolution. But Chief says opportunity for U.S. ethanol in China. So there's an export. Russia's wheat harvest crushes U.S. farmers. European interest in U.S. beef remains strong. Quota problems are limiting exports. One more, supply woes. Brazil cuts into the U.S. soybean market share in China. So as we halted our supply of soybeans to China, Brazil seizes the opportunity and starts selling to China their soybeans. Obviously, this is going to affect our farmers and our growers here who have been naturally meeting quotas year after year. And all of a sudden now, as one president put it, we're going to stop sending and exporting to China. And all of a sudden, what do we do with this extra food? You heard about milk being poured out. You heard about corn. Some of you know about these things, some of you don't. You can look at it, but I'll just say it's no small problem. So who are the grain importers and exporters, and how is this world interdependent? Why is it this way? All right, we're going to address just a few of those things. So just to set some more facts real quick, as you look at this picture, what you follow here, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you have the flow of at least 1 million metric tons. Green is wheat, yellow is corn. This is our flour or bread, whether it be pasta or whether it be, again, tortillas, corn. So United States, the bread basket here, the center to Canada. We have to the Caribbean, South America as well. And then, of course, all over the rest of the world, Northern Africa, Europe, China, and the like. If you look at these colors, you'll see who are the net exporters. Obviously, America being darkest here, 70 million and above. Alaska being part of the U.S. And then there's 10 to 70 million, less than 10 million. And then you have the purple, which are net importers, meaning they buy more corn and more wheat from other people than they are able to supply for themselves. China more recently has said they're able to probably feed 2/3 of their population if they were dependent only on themselves. So they've come a long way. I don't know that they're necessarily net importers. This is old data, but just to show the point that we're making today as far as import, export, and global interdependence. This was 2005, Pearson Hall. So at that time, China was an importer still, a major importer, as was much of Africa. These colors would be different today. It wouldn't be too much of a search. In my other class, if you're taking sustainable ag and the environment, we'll actually have more updated data to look at because we will just have one lecture on food security in that class, just as we'll have a couple lectures of sustainable ag in this one, Unit 2. So center of production. What is that? Well, centers of production help to explain this phenomena, in part, actually. Center of production is a geographical region where production of a particular crop is especially high. All right. So where would you say the center of production is for corn? What is the United States of America? Right. So it looks like Canada probably exports about as much wheat, probably cold winter wheat, but I don't know, given the number of arrows we have, I'm thinking the U.S. beats Canada as well in the wheat. So we have mastered the art of growing corn and wheat, and we've bred for this. We've genetically engineered for this. We've done a lot of science on when and how to plant and harvest the wheat and the corn and so forth, such that we've become the center of production for those things. And when that happens, you become a specialist, so to speak, and a powerhouse in the world market for providing that particular commodity or crop. It is not the same as well, that's what we'll talk about a little later, a region of diversity. So let's continue with center of production. So what you'll notice is most agriculture occurs in and around global green belts. So you can look at the longitudes and latitudes here, and areas where the climate is most conducive to high yielding agriculture production is right in here. And you can see a good swath of the United States is covered in green and is able then somehow or another in large parts to grow food. Particular kinds of food, right? let me say that, particular kinds of food. We will try to grow all kinds of food everywhere, but not all kinds of food will be successful growing. Uh, you can plant an orange tree if you like, and a lemon tree. And if you have here in Southwest Missouri or anywhere in Missouri, let me know what kind of success you've got. But it would probably be rather difficult. You're probably best suited to plant an apple tree or a plum tree or a peach tree. Those grow quite well here. But I have never, and growing up here in South Texas, I don't know if this arrow is coming out. But anyway, I'm indicating South Texas region, just below that 30 degrees north. There's bucos and bunches of grapefruit and oranges and tangerines and Mexican lime. If you go a little further south into Mexico, now you have limes. But you're not going to grow any apples there. Just ain't going to happen. Or they're going to be quite a bit different. The oranges we grow in Texas are a little different than Florida. Florida grows oranges people like to eat. Texas grows oranges people like to juice. Have a lot of juice, but they'll have a lot of seeds and a very thin and hard. They're called a sweet orange, and they're best for orange juice production. Anyway, so different foods grow in different areas according to their geographic region and the climate present there. So, where did your food originate? It'd be nice if you pause me and you kind of just stare at this and study what it's saying. You know, blue here, West Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia. You work your way around the world here, the Americas, Africa, and Europe. And each of these lines, a color represents food or exports connected to other regions due to the importance of those crops. So let's say right here, you have a whole bunch of yellow lines going all over the place. Well, Southeast Mediterranean is supplying something that nobody else can supply. And so it's giving it all over the world. You can try to follow, but I can see one yellow here in North America. Where do bananas grow? Maybe they're growing bananas or olives. You know what? Olives grow real well in the Southeast Mediterranean. And so anyway, this is all this is meant to say. Whoops. Sorry about that. I'll show you another graph where it actually shows you what those native crops are. But there are crops that are native to each country, and they may undergo breeding in that country for improvement and then exported to other countries. We like to try new fruits. The star fruit, right, is one of those, that passion fruit. These are other things that have become popular here in the U.S. that we import. And for those that are able to successfully adapt or breed, we might even be able to grow them here in America. The magnitude of the contribution is indicated by the width of the connecting line. So the regional food supply values were formed by deriving a population-weighted average of the national food supply across countries that make up each region. So as you look at those, what would be, say, cassava, doesn't grow over beans, certain kinds of maize, sweet versus starchy, corn, starch corn, sweet corn, rice, coffee, sugar cane. Each of these require certain climatic requirements in order to grow there. So those are regions of diversity. And here is that list I was referring to a little better. So look in North America. Hey, did y'all know blueberries and pumpkins originated here? As did sunflowers. Can't quite tell those. I don't think those are tomatoes because tomatoes should be here. And yeah, weird. Maybe those are tomatoes, but I'm pretty certain tomatoes. Well, it might have had two independent events. But this is just a fun chart to kind of understand maybe where your food originated, even if it was not a center of production. Because one thing you'll note is that corn is not here. Whereas corn, and a survey will tell you it's right here in Mexico. That's right, folks. You heard it here first, maybe second. Right in this area, right where my arrow is, and I really don't know if this is coming out on the screen or not, but I'm pointing to about the central western part of Mexico. This is where corn originally evolved and diversified. So whenever we're trying to improve the corn of wheat growth here in the United States, we would want to go back to Mexico and try to find that wild corn, which is nowhere near edible in the way that we eat our corn, grow our corn, but we can try to introgress. That means we can try to get genes from the wild corn and put them into our special hybrid corns and give them traits that they hadn't had before. Again, we may talk some more about that later. But anyway, just spend some time on this slide. You can pause me and look at it, and it's really cool to see where regions of diversity are for those food crops. They do often coincide with centers of production, but not always. All right, so diversity, many different forms of crops can be found in regions of diversity. Wild type, that is, they're non-cultivated or relative of a crop. So they've been growing in the environment over thousands of years. They've adapted to the pressures, the disease pressures, the fungal, bacterial, insectal competition, other plant competition, environment for the amount of rainfall, the temperature, everything. And so you're going to have a different gene composition, right? A different genotype or genome composition than those which local farmers have been selecting over the years. The more you select a particular trait that you like, the less diversity there's going to be. And you get to a point where these varieties that are developed by local farmers over time, we call them a landrace or a landrace. So a landrace is an improved variety that have the specific genes that we like and prefer because maybe they're resistant to disease or because they have a particularly tasty fruit or a good texture or a lot of juice. There's a lot of reasons to select, or they just do better in some environments than others. All right, so my point here is diversity is in the wild type, in those regions of diversity. You would, as a plant scientist, you would go back and study over here or look here or find germplasm from these other countries and bring them back into your population to try to improve it further. You can't just be happy with the variety that's been developed to date, because that variety will no longer be any good here in about 7 to 8 years. And that's about the longevity of most improved developed. If you've ever watched or heard the Red Queen hypothesis, that comes from Alice in Wonderland. You have to run as fast as you can just to stay in place. If we stopped adapting, if we stopped breeding once we hit what we thought was a jackpot, again, it's only a matter of time. You stop running, and those disease pressures and the environment are going to catch up, and you will no longer have that variety. So it's constant improvement. Corn we're eating today is not the same corn of the 1980s even. All right, well, who came up with this idea? Let's kind of wrap this up just with a little historical tribute to Nikolai Vavilov. So he was a Russian plant explorer during the 1900s, early 1900s, as you can tell by that picture, and one of the largest collection of seeds and other plant genetic material that he developed. It's kind of a sad story, actually. It's a great historical story. While now we have given him the credit, and we know that Vavilov is the one who first came up with this idea, during his lifetime he was never acknowledged, and indeed he was actually jailed and imprisoned. I told you this stuff gets political. So 9 people died protecting part of the collection that he began, Vavilov, during the siege of Leningrad in 1943 and 1944. Communist Stalin-supported scientist Trofim Lysenko incorrectly opposed Vavilov. So at that time, you know that it hadn't quite been 100 years since Mendel's ideas, and he could see the science, and he saw the reason, the logic, and as he approached his plant studies. But this guy Lysenko, for political reasons, opposed the Mendelian genetic theories, whereas Vavilov publicly challenged him, and Stalin did not like that. and they were not doing good. In the U.S., as you know, with the Green Revolution, in Mexico and India were starting to pick up and look good. Well, Stalin blamed Vavilov for the Russian famine then, and he was arrested in 1940, and he died in prison of starvation in 1943. He is the one that came up with not just the idea, I would say, because it's more than an idea now, it's pretty much proven and shown to be true. But by listening to farmers and learning the importance of genetic diversity to growing a healthy farm and improvement of particular land races, he contributed much to Russian plan. Lysenko, as I mentioned in the notes in the PowerPoint, he thought if wheat was raised in the right environment, it would become rye. Very nice, Lysenko. You're a genius. Not. So Vavilov's theory of the center of the origin of cultivated plants is as such. He came up with 8 centers of crop origin. Some now will say are about 6 centers of origin. But these are the present day global activities in plant science. We have Mesoamerica, which is number 7, and this is where corn is thought to, and this is where a lot of plant science, breeding, and conservation. I know University of Iowa, Cornell, actually many universities in Minnesota will go down to Mexico and study corn for that purpose. But you have the Mediterranean, number 5, the Andes in Peru, Chile, you have China and India, number 1 and 2, Turkey, number 3. And so these are the major centers of diversity, and it's no small thing that, of course, you see Iraq there, number 4, 3, and that crescent near where would be thought the Garden of Eden, and a civilization evolved going down or coming out of Africa, depends on your view there. Whether they were coming up, then Ethiopia might have been first. So these are not numbered in the order in which they were discovered. I don't believe they're just the 8 that he sees now. Whether they evolved, how that got there, it's a subject of plenty of study in evolutionary botany, if you'd like. But to just summarize here in the last minute or two, the theory of the center of origins, that is, the geographic region of enhanced variability within a crop species, is believed to be the place where the crop was first domesticated and used in selection for improvement for food purposes. In these regions of diversity or origin, center of origin, kind of same thing, center of origin or regions of diversity, almost synonymous now, is one idea, and that was proposed by Vavilov first. Although because there are green belts, areas where food grows best because of the climate and the soil and the water availability, we also have various centers of production, which may be different than regions of diversity, but nonetheless, they can be regions of high production and become or allow those countries and those regions to become mass exporters. And those who do not have the soil, the weather, or the technology, because technology is a big part of it, they become the importers until they learn otherwise. And this is where we stand today. We stand in a global economy with agriculture. There's an interdependence of nations and a balance of political powers. All it must be considered, even as it comes down to exporting GMO foods. You can have the best invention. We had that golden rice, as we'll talk about eventually, and it still sits. Why? Because of political opposition in the countries and the cultures. And we can't necessarily discredit them because, they have reasons, and they have indigenous peoples and other crops of their own that must be protected for their economy. It's a more complex issue than what might seem on the surface. So that'll wrap up this lecture 1 on food and agriculture, what we get out of food, where food grows, why it grows there, and then centers of diversity and how we can get diverse foods for our diet. All right, we'll see you next time.